Me and Mary. Hi, sweetie pie. You're sneaking in. You can't sneak in. There's no way to sneak in. How you be? Okay. Did you all bring any more baptism stuff? Okay.
It's confirmation.
Confirmation will work. Oh, that's neat. You and Miss Diane.
1960.
1960.
I was 12.
Miss Episcopalian herself.
October 48. Am I older than you?
Look at that. Uh-huh.
I don't know. I think this is me. I think this is me. I think that's right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And you can't find any? Well, do you know any stories about your baptism? You were never told any stories about your baptism?
I do.
Okay.
Between two churches, I'm not sure which one.
Uh-huh.
We switched when I was real little.
Right. You don't know which one?
Don't know even which one.
Uh-huh. You know a story?
Well, just, I know I'm Episcopalian and I was baptized Episcopalian.
Uh-huh.
So my father was a fighter pilot during the war, and he came back from the war and could not stop drinking. Evidently, they had to get loaded to fly. So my mother never told me much until I was a lot older because I didn't know him. I didn't grow up with him. I had a stepfather, but he had bricklaying business, and she tried to keep that going, and she tried really hard, to make it work. So the Episcopal rector in Milton, which is right
Uh-huh.
next to Lewis, her mother went to the Presbyterian church, but the Episcopal rector really helped her. And, he helped her get back on her feet, and he helped supported her, and I know exactly how. And then, so then my sister and I were baptized when we weren't babies. We were probably, we were 3 and 5 when she married my stepfather. So, we were probably somewhere, younger than that.
Uh-huh.
But that's how we ended up in the Episcopal church. And so then when she married and moved to Lewis, we always went to St. Peter's. St. Peter's is here, Mulberry Street. I mean, it was a half a block. We walked to church.
Uh-huh.
And just my sister and I went. Nobody else in the family went, but we went by ourselves. We walked.
Wow.
Yeah, and sang the choir, and never looked back. And then I was telling you yesterday that my brother Jerry, who was his father was Catholic, but he was excommunicated because he had married my mother, who wasn't a Catholic. So he never went to church, and they sent Jerry to parochial school because he was a little bit of a handful. And I was telling Mary Ann at the dinner the other night, the nuns told him that he was going to die and go to hell because he wasn't baptized in 2nd grade. So he came home with that story, and eventually he was baptized Catholic.
Wow.
But he only went to Catholic school, I think, that year. I don't think he went back after.
I love Catholic stories. Not.
But again, it could have been any church or somebody else. I don't know that my mother ever went there. I think it was just counseling her and helping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's cool, though.
Yeah.
That's really good.
No, and I couldn't find any
Yeah.
paperwork.
Yeah. So, and what tradition, Jim? Methodist. I think I've asked you that about 1,000 times. So, I try to retain it, but sometimes.
Till I met Sue.
Uh-huh.
Then we were Catholic.
Yeah.
She was Catholic. Until she got sick of that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Found Episcopal because she liked the tradition of the service that she grew up with.
Right.
And, but now, taboos and
Right. Sue and I had some really good conversations. We really did. And we had a women's retreat over at Beth Tickle's house. I don't know if you remember that or not. But we did it on the Samaritan woman at the well. And I remember Sue's face at that women's retreat. Because we talked about, you know,
How sick was she at that?
she wasn't very sick at that point. She was pretty well. It wasn't very long after you all came here. And so I just remember the relief on her face, because the Samaritan woman, there's this portion of it that says the Samaritan woman had 5 husbands, and you know, and we talked about divorce. We talked about traditions in different churches. And she walked out of that retreat just almost like a different person. I mean, the relief on her face was just unreal. Go ahead.
Because of the guilt of divorce.
Yeah.
And she didn't talk about that much, so I don't know. I didn't have the feeling that that was something she was still grappling with.
Yeah.
But she didn't talk about a lot of that.
Yeah. She was grappling with the church more than she was the guilt. She was grappling with the way the church had treated her.
Well, that's typical in a traditional
Yeah. Yeah.
situation.
Right. And the question of, basically it's, are they right, or is what I'm feeling right? You know, the institution says this, I'm feeling this. You know, do I have a right to feel this? Do I have a right to hold on to this? Do I have a right to do this? When the institution that I've grown up with and that has been so heavy-handed has said this all my life, and this is what I've followed all my life, and I'm choosing something completely different.
Jennifer's mom, after we were divorced, was asked, well, not asked, they were told that she wasn't welcome.
Yeah.
This was in Atlanta, but it was at the cathedral church that she had grown up with. And as a result of that, my daughter had no Christian education at all. Except, well, first grade she did, but after that, nothing, because they didn't go to church.
Right.
And when she got married, Jennifer, she had to take I don't even know what you call it, but they wouldn't marry her without classes.
RCIA? Probably.
She was 27 years old.
Right.
But that was the only education she ever had.
Right.
A few months at 27 years old.
Right. I'm sure. And
Because
right.
her mother was told she couldn't come to church.
Right. And see, all of those stories are one reason why I really left the Catholic Church, because I would have been the one that would have had to tell her she couldn't come, because they forced a lot of times the priests wouldn't. They would force it off on Christian educators.
Well, that's what they did with Jennifer. Some lay person or deacon.
They foisted it off on the person running the catechumenate, running the RCIA, and they made that person tell, because the priest was too chicken. I want to add a different word at the end of that, but I'll just leave it at that. And you know, I got to a point I couldn't do it anymore. I could not do it one more time. To me it was sinful. It was sinful. And you would bring people into the RCIA. You would prepare them for baptism. You would get them all the way to almost to the Easter Vigil. You know, they'd be in the middle of Lent. They'd be doing the rituals right before Lent, on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Sundays, you do special exorcisms and other rituals. They would get them in the middle of that, and then their annulment wouldn't come through. And you'd have to tell them they couldn't be baptized at the Easter Vigil. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. It was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
So they didn't send the money in to the Pope?
They didn't send the right amount. Not enough. You know. Or it didn't get there in time. Or it didn't, whatever. Didn't meet. And it really was. It was a racket.
What is RCIA?
RCIA is Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults. Okay? And it's we have it in the Episcopal Church. Not many people know it. We have a process for bringing adults into the church at different points in their life. And it's intended, it's not the same process that they did in the early church where you go 3 years, but it's intended for a longer period of instruction. We did a mini version of it with Kyle and with you, but we didn't do the full blown. I didn't use the same rituals that the Roman Catholic Church uses. We have those same forms in the Episcopal Church. So we could do, if I had hi Mary, if I had a core group, if I had a larger group of adults, I would do that. I would do a course. Because I think what the rituals are intended to do is two things. It's to deepen the faith of the people coming into the church and to allow enough breadth for their questions and for opening up any issues or concerns. Or, it's like David was the perfect person to have in the group because he busted things open all the time. He asked great questions. He really did. And got things out on the table that maybe other people didn't know how to ask. And so you need people who belong to the tradition or that can do those kinds of things. You need sponsors and you need people that can ask questions. And so it's a longer process of looking at the faith and opening it up. Okay? And then the rituals accompany it. So there are blessings, like that oil that has the red handles on it. That's oil of catechumens. So if we were doing the RCIA it's not called RCIA in our tradition, but it's the same process. If we were doing that, we would do blessings of people that are preparing for baptism. So like when Nikki's husband, Rob Powell's, was preparing for baptism, I could have done those rituals with him of anointing him at different points during his time of preparation so that he was a catechumen. He was somebody in preparing. He was in catechesis, catechism. Okay, he was studying. He was preparing for baptism, and so you use the oil of catechism as a strengthening, and the second reason you do the rituals is as a witness to the congregation, to say, are you taking your faith as seriously? Are you doing the same kind of preparation? Is this as important to you as it is to them? And then the congregation gets underneath and begins to support the people that are coming into the church. And so those rituals are really an important aspect of bringing new people into the church. Okay? The other thing, and Sandra had talked about this when she met with the men about membership and walking with new members, people that come into the parish. My friend Judy in Kentucky had written a ritual that when new people come into the parish, how do you walk with new people and incorporate new people into the parish? If they're already baptized, if they're already members, if they're moving from one community to another, one tradition to another, one parish to another, one Episcopal church to another Episcopal church, what do you do? How do you incorporate them into the community? And there's nothing in the Episcopal church that does that. There really isn't. And my friend wrote a ritual that it's a process really similar to the catechumenal process of spending time together with people in the parish, of asking questions, of getting to know each other, and then a ritual at the end of that to welcome people and, say a formal celebration of saying you're a formal member of the community. And I think those kinds of things, not having them in place really makes a difference. I think if we had them in place, the things that you do with bringing people in would be even stronger. So, what? You're giggling, what?
I'm just thinking in the Methodist church when we first went to Aldersgate, and I was 6 or 7 years old, and the head minister would come and visit, and then the associate minister, and then a lay person would come. Well, the associate minister was this little tiny man who was just kind of comical. As a 6 or 7-year-old, I was almost as tall as him. He was like, I could see my father now, and he's like, and, so we lived in a ranch house, and when you went out the front door, you walked into a little area. There was a coat closet, and here was the front door. So this guy's like standing facing this way, and he puts his hand on the coat closet door, and he said goodbye, and he literally walked into the closet. That's all I remember.
Nobody laughed.
My father said, I don't know whether to leave it in or
He actually went in.
Oh.
close it, and you know how stuck
You could
that,
never get in that closet.
like I couldn't get in there. So he must have been like underneath where that.
Oh, geez, that's very funny. That's very funny. That's very funny. So it is interesting how we come into religious traditions and how we transfer into other traditions. So anybody else have stories they want to share? Do you?
I was brought up Catholic.
Uh-huh.
School.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny, and for a while, I just didn't go to church, and neither did my husband, Joe. So when we went to get married, of course, we went to the Catholic Church first. Well, that was not going to work. You haven't, done your Easter duty, your Christmas duty, you've done nothing.
Right.
So without having to go through a lot of hoops and that, so we just left very discouraged. And then we're thinking, now what can we do? Because we want to go into a church, and this is, we just had become engaged, so our marriage was all down the road for a while. So we said, well, we'll pick the Episcopalian church. That's the closest to Catholic as we can get. We'll see how
Uh-huh.
it works out.
Uh-huh.
Well, it was wonderful. We
Yeah.
walked in there. The priest was wonderful. His wife was very active within the church too. We were part of that. They introduced us to a group of people.
Uh-huh.
It was like a welcoming committee.
Yeah.
It was so nice. And of course, we had to go to those
Marriage encounters. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can't remember what you call them now. So we went there, and we ended up, it wasn't long after we chose, not yet married, but we
Right.
It was a beautiful introduction.
Right.
And I think that's what's, when people walk in who
Right.
are new, and that to make them feel
Right.
they want to come back.
Right.
They want to be
Right.
part of
Right.
the community.
Right.
But it was funny when we had Kelly later, and that was in New York. The priest was a supply priest. He was about 100 years old. And we're getting ready. I want Kelly baptized. I'm still of the Catholic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She has to be baptized early in that. And I think she was just like under 12 weeks. She was very, very young. And he kept going, she's really too early to be baptized. She needs to be baptized later. And I said, no, this is, of course, another church. And I said, no, I said, I want her baptized now. And so,
So
purgatory.
Limbo doesn't exist anymore. You know that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, sure enough, the day comes, and I'm a nervous wreck because this guy is so elderly. I mean, he like shakes.
Yeah.
And I was very nervous with her, with him. And he sits there and he presents her.
Uh-huh.
And of course, she doesn't have a lot of control. She's still just a very young infant. He said, now this is normally younger of the children that we baptize in that. And he came right out and said how I insisted that she be baptized.
Yeah. Good for you.
Congregation.
Good for you.
Like I was doing something wrong.
Good for you.
And, but anyway, he baptized her.
Good for you.
And he didn't. You were going to say, yeah, that's what I was nervous about. So
Wow.
it could have been, I think, for us, for her, she
Right.
doesn't remember.
Right.
But for us, it wasn't a great experience with him because he wasn't firm on the
Right.
on baptism.
Right. Right.
And that, what does it
Right.
matter?
Right. 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 Right.
That was mine.
Right. Right.
And I don't remember mine at all because, of course, I was an infant at the time. And I did go through confirmation also in the Catholic Church.
Anybody else?
I can remember when I made my first communion. I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and there was so much excitement about that day. We all wore white gowns and little veils, and it was just something to really look forward to. But that morning, one of the communicants had eaten something, just a taste or whatever it was.
And couldn't go.
Communion.
Oh.
To this day, I carry that thought.
Oh.
Thinking, that was so wrong.
Oh.
You weren't allowed to eat before you.
No, you couldn't eat. You had to fast.
And then further on down the years later, you can't eat. You can eat on your way to communion, for that matter. But I think, that was my first.
Oh, how wrong. Oh, how wrong.
Forgotten that.
Oh, how wrong. Donna, you have anything? No? Just your photograph?
Well, I mean, I was christened in the Episcopal church as a baby. Of course, my sister and I. My mother took me. We went to church every Sunday. My father never went to church, but my mother, he would drive us because my mother didn't drive, and we were in the choir and in the youth group, and I mean, I loved my childhood.
I did too, but like my sister and I went by ourselves. I mean, they never went. My father was Catholic. They got us there, but you know, I didn't think there was anything not normal. My father, stepfather was excommunicated because he married out of his wife died. His wife died like months after she gave birth to my stepsister from something. Yeah. So he just couldn't. And she married a Methodist, and they both were very, very active. I remember at my brother-in-law's funeral talking about how they both were so active in the churches, but in later years when David was getting older, she would bring him to church. He would come to his service, and then he would go to hers, because Catholics have them all day. So, they would come to the Methodist church. And comment. That's, how they both had stuck to their religions, but were very active in both of them. So I'm kind of surprised that she was married in the church. No, she was married in the church. I'm kind of surprised that they let her marry a Methodist in 1960.
Wow. Yeah, really. Yeah. 60 was young. It was pre-Vatican II.
Maybe, I remember the reception was at the Alpha. Maybe they didn't
Yeah.
have it in the church. Maybe I'm
Right.
misremembering that. I don't know if
Right.
they didn't. But she was able to practice as a Catholic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody must have slipped something in.
Well, the Catholic Church, you could, depending on who your priest was, there was, after Vatican II, there was a thing called internal quorum, and it was if your conscience allowed you to know that it was what you were doing was right, then you could take communion. And so, but very few priests would talk about that, and very few priests counseled couples in that way. I happened to work for a priest who did, and so it was a blessing to me to know how to counsel people. But very, very few clergy would do that. So.
We just find pictures of his baptismal gown here. It was in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
They all placed.
Oh my.
You had to
Oh my.
wash it and then let it dry. And you just couldn't. All of our kids were baptized in it.
Oh, neat.
But you're afraid it was going to just fall apart, because it was. Is it? Yeah. We would wash it and let it kind of air dry. But that was a nice tradition. We had that. And I passed it on to his brother, and they were Catholic, and they never had their kids baptized.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, I thought she would really be bored her. She didn't go to church at all.
Isn't that amazing?
She has the gown somewhere.
Yeah. Well, my family was Catholic. And I was born 4 pounds, 5 ounces. Yeah, so I was a bitty.
Me too.
Really?
I was the number 2,
You were number 2? 4 pounds?
4.5 pounds.
4.5 pounds. Oh, wow. She was big.
She was a twin.
Yeah. Well, I stayed in the hospital for a long time, about 3 weeks, and my mother, she wasn't churched yet. Do you know what that means? No, she wasn't churched. So there was a practice that you had to be, you had to wait a period of time before they would receive women back into the church and do a purification rite. After birth. No, I'm not kidding. This was I was born in 1951. So, but after birth, it's sort of like a Jewish ritual, that you're not purified after birth. So for the blood and water and all of that. So you had to be churched. They had to say special prayers and whatever before they would allow you to come back into the church.
And this was only the women.
Only the women, of course. Absolutely only the women, of course. Huh? Well, yeah, well, let's talk about that later. But so mother wasn't churched, and they did baptisms on Saturday afternoon, and my godparents and my father went, my grandparents went, and they took me out. I still wasn't much bigger, and it was in late October. I was baptized on the 28th of October, born on the 7th of October. And so Father Neeson was an 80-year-old priest, and he said I was the smallest baby he had ever baptized. Now, whether that was true or not, I don't know. But they couldn't find me in the blankets. So that's the story, they say. And the salt, I didn't like the salt. They used to use salt on your tongue as as bitterness of life, the bitterness that you will encounter. Put salt on everybody's tongue. Salt was a part of the baptismal rite in the Catholic Church. So I had salt placed on my tongue. So, and then all of the all of the same ritual, white garment, candle. So the white garment is the same in every tradition. It's the robe of wearing the garment of Christ, and the candle is the light of Christ. And so the prayers are pretty much the same. The only thing that's required for baptism is water and words. Those are the only two things. So water, and then the words are the same in every religious tradition. I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So it has to be a Trinitarian formula. And some traditions don't use exactly that same formula. So if and I'm not sure which ones. Don't ask me which ones, because I can't remember. But most religious, all the mainline Protestant traditions baptize using that particular formula. So they would never, like if a Methodist comes into our tradition, they're received and their baptism is recognized. They're never rebaptized. Baptists, never rebaptized. But we would have to be baptized again if we went to a Baptist church. Okay? I was confirmed before I received my first communion, and that was really unusual. So, in pre-Vatican II, but I was. And then I was the person who was chosen to read. There were certain prayers that you read on your first communion day, and I was the one chosen. I was in first grade. And that was the day I know that I was called to be a priest. Because I remember the dress, I remember the sun coming through the stained glass, I remember standing, I remember how it felt to stand and say those prayers. And I knew that I wasn't praying I knew it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't about me. I knew that I was praying in the name of that congregation, and that they were toward God. It didn't have really much of anything at all to do with me. It was about praying those prayers for the rest of that congregation. I didn't know how to name it. I didn't know what to say about it, but I knew that it was leading worship. Couldn't say it that way, but that's what I knew that. And so I did all the things that I could do to get close to that experience. So I did music. I did, choir director when I was in the 7th and 8th grade. That made me real popular. And so, they fought over me to become a nun, So the faith and I mean, I was really formed in faith. Baptism really meant a lot to me, and still does. I mean, still does. It which is why this baptismal font is so important. I think hearing what what the font does. One of the fathers of the church says you have to have enough water to drown in. And we don't think in those terms of baptism. We think of as, washing away original sin, or we think of cleansing. But we don't think of dying. We don't think of drowning. But that's what baptism is. It's dying to sin and being raised to new life. And so the baptismal font that's big enough to see that could actually happen is really an important symbol. And that's why in the early church, that's what they looked like. It was death and resurrection. So you could actually see that happening in a pool that big. And so it doesn't make any difference how many babies we baptize. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. It doesn't make any difference how many adults we have in a catechumenal process. It really doesn't. And just being able to pass by that water and know that we recommit to that every single time we pass it. We put our hand in the water and recommit to that. We hear the sound of the water. All of those things draw us back to what our relationship to baptism and our commitment to baptism. And we renew, do you accept Jesus as your Savior and Lord? So the commitment to that every week, every time we pass it, is really the key. And that's why, people question why I want it. That's it. It's that.
What's the difference between the term christening and, where did the term christening come from? 'Cause I always thought it was, you were christened as a baby, and I didn't really think of it as being a baptism. I thought it was so what's the difference?
Christening is used more in like a Baptist place. When Sandra talked about it, she talked about it as a dedication. Do you remember her talking about that? She had, maybe the men do, that when she was a baby, she was brought into the Baptist congregation and she was dedicated, okay, or she was christened. And it means blessed and dedicated to Christ, but not baptized. Baptism incorporates you into the church. It brings you into the church, into the body of Christ, makes you one with Christ. Gives you this, gives you this clothing. Says that you're part of this community. And so christening is saying, I have my mother and my father are baptized. They don't want us to go to limbo, only they wouldn't say limbo, okay? But they want to draw us into this community, but they're not old enough to be baptized, okay? They're not old enough to speak for themselves. They're not old enough to profess their faith. Okay, so but we want them close. We want them incorporated into the community, and this is the best we can do, But they're here, they're part of us, but they're not able to profess their faith yet. So christening is that.
Well, I think I must have been using the term incorrectly, because, I was baptized into the Episcopal Church.
Yes, you were.
I'm with you. I thought christening and baptism were the same thing.
I did too. And I
I did.
think in the Catholic Church, they still use christening sometimes, rather than when my grandchildren were christened.
Mm-hmm.
It was a christening party,
Mm-hmm.
not a baptismal party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Baptized.
Yeah, but christening really is more really for Baptist traditions and other traditions that are not going to fully initiate them. And for traditions that, like Catholic, Episcopalian, Methodist, Lutheran, those traditions that fully incorporate them into the church, that's baptism. If they say the words, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, that's baptism. Okay? It's not a christening. It's christening to the point that you take on the garment of Christ. Okay. But really, christening is this initial welcoming into the community, but not fully baptized, not fully initiated. Okay?
I can remember when my sister Audrey got re-baptized in the church when she got married, and my mother was so angry because
She should have.
she has already been baptized. My mother was very angry about that,
She should have been.
and she was, but Audrey did it anyway.
Well, and to be incorporated into that tradition, she had to be rebaptized. She had to be, because those traditions force you to be rebaptized. You know, if you move from one Baptist church to another, you're rebaptized. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, like from Presbyterian, like ministers from a Presbyterian church to a Presbyterian church, you're ordained you're a minister in a Presbyterian church, and you're ordained for that church. And when you go to a different one, you're ordained in that church. So it's not in the Episcopal church, you're ordained for the whole church, not for individual communities. So every religious tradition has its own practices, and you have to kind of be aware of that.
Why are those things important?
Why do you think they are? Exactly. Well, you can look at it in a positive way and say it keeps order.
Keeps the riffraff out.
You can look at it in a positive way and say it keeps order. And that would be what, because you call ordination holy orders, okay? And every person, every baptized, every person in the church has an order. Do you know you have an order in the church? You have an order in the church. Your order is laity. You're a lay person. Okay, that's your order. Okay, so what are your responsibilities as a lay person? Okay, get your prayer book out. Huh? Attend church, that's one of them. But you have specific ministries. And the first order of the church is layperson. The laity is the first order, not the deacon, not the priest, not the bishop, but the first order in the church is, hi Barbara, first order in the church is is the layperson. So what do you do? What is your job? The ministry. Who are the ministers of the church? Page 855. So, who are the ministers of the church? The ministers of the church are laypersons, bishops, priests, and deacons. Okay, so those are the four orders of the church. What is the ministry of the laity? The ministry of laypersons is to represent Christ and his church. Okay, so every time you go out, you're supposed to look like Christ. And you represent the church, to bear witness to Christ wherever you may be, according to the gifts given to you. So every time you make a prayer shawl, you represent Christ. Okay? Every time you send a card or make a phone call or go to the lighthouse or insist that we do cards for the veterans, okay, you represent Christ. Okay? According to the gifts given to them. Jim, your kindness and your charity and your what I experience from you is your bigness of warmth and welcome. I experience you as one of the kindest people that I know. I do. And so that is the way, that's a gift that's given to you. And that's the way you represent Christ. David, all the things that you're, when I first met you, your irritating questions. Yeah. You know?
It always comes up.
It always does. You know? But they would keep you. I know. And now I've fallen in love with them, And so, but the gifts, those are gifts. And Rowena, your gifts, oh my gosh. The gifts that you have and the dedication and devotion that you have to the altar and to the table of the Lord. And the gifts that you've given, the life of service that you've given to this community of faith. And things that you do that nobody knows. And Chris sitting over there. Zoning out. That's okay. You can zone out. Chris is going to run for vestry. I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled. I'm thrilled. Chris has abundant gifts. I found that out when she sold our house. But she, the kindness and the beauty that she brings. The brilliance that she brings. She is one smart cookie. Okay? So the gifts that we bring to carry on Christ's work of reconciliation in the world. We've got a responsibility to do that, to carry on Christ's reconciliation in the world and to take our place in life and worship in the governance of the church. We've got a responsibility to do that. We've got a responsibility to come to parish meeting next week. It's not just a fly-by-night kind of thing. Hi, come in. Hi. Go say hello. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. No, you're not. No, you're not. So that's one of the orders. The bishop has to be a apostle, chief priest, head of the diocese. The priest is a presbyter, oversees the church, is a pastor to the people, proclaims the gospel sacraments. The deacon takes care of the people in need. And the duty of all Christians is to follow Christ, to come together week by week for corporate worship, to work, to pray, to give for the spread of the kingdom. So that's part of the reason, is because we're part of the order, so we have order in the church. But Jim, the power that churches have, and I think a lot of what we do with it is we exclude people. The Catholic, the opposite of that. When we use institutions to say, you're in, you're out, you can't come, this one's out, you can't do this, you can't do that. And we do, I can't be a priest, you're female. That's right. And you can't go to communion because you're remarried, and you can't do this because you didn't pay for your annulment in time, and you can't do this because, so institutions can be Christ never intended for the church to be institutionalized. It was humans that did that. And if you think about our Gospels, even in the formation of our Gospels and the way that they became structured, Gospels got kicked out because they said the wrong thing. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene got shoved into the dustbin because it talked about women's leadership in the church. So it didn't get put in the canons of the four Gospels because it couldn't be said that women were leaders in the church. So let's put that, let's put that away. Let's pretend that was never part of the tradition. And it was. Let's call her a prostitute, Let's sully her reputation. Let's mess it up. Just like we do with anybody that we don't want to accept today. We'll sully their reputation. And we do that right now. So those kinds of things, and that's called sin. That's called sin. It really is. And it was never what Christ intended. It's never what Christ intended. So, and the Episcopal Church is as sinful as any other religious tradition. Okay? We're not perfect. Hopefully it is. Hopefully it should be. Hi, how you doing? Hi. Hopefully it should be, but whether it is or not, I don't know. Okay? It's up. Put it this way. It's up to us to make sure that it is. You know, and when we fall into sin, we repent and return to the Lord.
Does the Jewish church have something similar to baptism other than
Yes, actually they do. They do have water rites, and they do have purification rites, and so yeah, it's not quite as not quite the same, but they do have a baptismal liturgy, and for women, I talked about the purification rites. They do have. They have wonderful bathhouses for women for purification that they do every month, called a mikveh. Okay? All righty. Good deal. Next week, I'm going to talk a little bit about... No, next week is parish meeting. Next week is parish meeting. Great. Thank you all.
Is Mary coming back or am I doing the music?
No, you're doing the music. Mary's